It was a Texas night that hummed with trouble. Thick heat in the air, the distant rumble of thunder rolling across the plains, and the kind of darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. Out at the old Henderson ranch, the wind rattled, the porch light, casting long, flickering shadows across the cracked wooden boards. Jack Henderson sat in his wheelchair by the window, the soft creak of the floor beneath him familiar as the ache in his bones. He'd seen a lot in his 68 years. Combat tours, firefights in far-off deserts, the birth of his children, and the slow, bitter erosion of a family built on secrets. But even after all that, he could feel it tonight, deep in his gut, like the throb of an old wound. Something wasn't right. His gaze shifted toward the tree line. The yard stretched out in front of him, open and wide like the years he had left, and there, just beyond the barbed wire fence, two small lights blinked in the dark. Headlights, low and steady, a car idling where no one should be at this hour. Jack's fingers curled tighter around the arms of his chair. A soft growl rumbled by his feet. Briggs. The German shepherd lay curled near the porch door, his black and tan coat glinting in the dim light. He wasn't Jack's dog, not really. He'd just shown up one day after a storm, wet and ragged, with scars that told a story no one had written down. Jack hadn't named him at first, but the dog stayed, and after a while Jack started calling him Briggs. It felt right somehow, like the name fit the way he moved, careful, steady, always watching. Briggs lifted his head now, ears pricked, eyes sharp and locked on the headlights in the distance. Jack followed his gaze. The truck didn't move. It just sat there, engine low, a hum vibrating across the ground like a warning. And in that moment, Jack knew. This wasn't a lost traveler. This wasn't a delivery. This was the storm breaking finally after all these years. He pushed himself forward in the chair, every muscle tight, every nerve on edge. "Briggs," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly. "Stay close." The dog's ears twitched, a low whine catching in his throat. Jack could almost feel the tension in the air, like the quiet before a gunshot, the moment when everything balanced on a knife's edge. He wasn't sure how long they sat there. Minutes, maybe. But when the truck finally backed up and turned off its lights, disappearing down the dirt road, Jack felt something cold settle deep in his chest. He wasn't just imagining things. Someone was watching. The next morning dawned hot and sticky, the kind of day that made sweat bead on the back of your neck before you'd even poured your first cup of coffee. Jack sat at the kitchen table, the news playing low on the old radio, the smell of fried bacon filling the air. He stared at the paper, but the words blurred together, his mind still stuck in the night before. Briggs lay by the back door, pause, twitching as if chasing something in his dreams. Then the front door slammed open and in walked Ethan, Jack's son, all 6'2" of him, broad-shouldered in his crisp police uniform, badge gleaming on his chest. The air shifted the second he stepped in, like the heat had followed him through the door. Jack looked up, his voice rough. "You're early." Ethan didn't smile. He never did anymore. His eyes were dark, sharp in a way that made Jack's skin crawl. "There was a call last night," Ethan said, dropping into the chair across from him. "Out by the old fence line. Some idiot parked where he shouldn't have been." Jack's heart thumped once, hard. "Sheriff thinks it was a drunk looking for a place to crash," Ethan continued, voice tight, "but I'm not so sure." Briggs let out a soft growl almost under his breath. Ethan's eyes flicked down to the dog, a hint of something, disgust maybe, or just calculation, passing across his face. Jack didn't miss it. "You got a problem?" "With the dog?" he asked, voice steady but edged with steel. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed. "No, just don't see the point in keeping a stray around. Never know what they might bring in." Jack's stomach twisted. He didn't like the way Ethan looked at Briggs, like he was something to be handled, not a living thing. Before Jack could speak, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then stood up fast, chair scraping against the floor. Duty calls. He paused at the door, looking back at Jack like he wanted to say something more. But whatever it was, he swallowed it down, turned on his heel, and left. The screen door banged shut behind him, and the sound echoed in the still kitchen, like the crack of a rifle. Jack exhaled slow, tension bleeding from his shoulders. Briggs shifted, sitting up, his dark eyes watching the door long after Ethan had gone. Jack leaned down, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Smart boy," he murmured. Briggs huffed softly, almost like he agreed. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals, the channel where we share true stories of the incredible bonds between people and their animal companions. We've got a lot more coming your way. Later that afternoon, Jack rolled himself out to the porch, the heat pressing down heavy, the cicadas buzzing in the trees. Briggs sat beside him, ears flicking at every sound, his body coiled tight, ready for something. Jack stared out across the fields, a knot in his gut. He knew Ethan wasn't telling him the whole truth. The truck last night wasn't just a random visitor. And the way Ethan had looked at that dog, something was coming. Jack didn't know what yet, but he knew this much. When the storm broke, it would be Briggs who stood by his side. The Texas sun beat down hard by noon, casting long, wavering shadows across the dry fields. Jack sat on the porch, a cold glass of sweet tea sweating on the small table next to him, watching as the wind stirred the dust along the driveway. Briggs lay at his feet, panting softly, his black and tan coat gleaming in the light. His ears twitched every so often like he was listening to something only he could hear. Jack's mind wasn't on the heat, though. It was on Ethan. The way his son had looked at him that morning, the sharpness in his voice, the way his eyes lingered a little too long on Briggs, none of it sat right. Jack had been a soldier long enough to know when someone was holding back, when a man had a plan that didn't include everyone else in the room. And Ethan, his boy wasn't the same kid who used to beg to go hunting on weekends or ask a million questions about the medals on Jack's shelf. He was colder now, harder, and there was something in his eyes, something that made Jack's skin crawl. Briggs shifted, ears pricking. His gaze snapped toward the tree line, and a low, warning growl rumbled in his chest. Jack followed his gaze, heart thumping. There, barely visible between the branches, was a flicker of movement. A man. Jack's breath caught. Briggs rose too, his feet, muscles tensed, a living alarm system. Jack wheeled forward slightly, squinting into the glare, but by the time he focused, the figure was gone, just trees now swaying in the breeze. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. Briggs let out a short, sharp bark and then sat back down, tail thumping once like a warning shot. Jack reached down, ruffling the fur behind Briggs's ears. "Good, eyes boy." Inside the house, the screen door banged open. Ethan strode out, his uniform crisp, badge catching the light, radio clipped to his belt. "Dad," he said, voice clipped. "What's going on out here?" Jack kept his eyes on the tree line. "Saw someone. By the fence." Ethan's posture stiffened. "Probably some vagrant, looking for an easy score. Happens out here sometimes." Jack's gut clenched. Or maybe someone looking for something else. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jack turned to look at him, steady and unflinching. "I think you know exactly what it means." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Briggs let out a low growl, a sound that seemed to slice through the heavy air. Ethan shifted his weight, his hand resting on the butt of his service pistol. "You're seeing ghosts, old man. Let me handle it." Jack's voice was low, steady. "Like you've been handling things? Like that truck last night?" Ethan's jaw tightened. A flicker of something. Anger, maybe, or guilt, passing over his face before he masked it. "I've got work to do," he muttered, turning on his heel and heading toward his patrol car. Jack watched him go, a knot of unease twisting tighter in his chest. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a man's ears ring. He sat in his chair by the window, staring out at the fields, moonlight casting a silver glow across the yard. Briggs lay nearby, head on his paws. But Jack could tell he wasn't asleep. His ears flicked with every creak, every distant rustle. At 2 a.m., headlights flashed across the living room wall. Jack's heart leapt into his throat. Briggs shot up, barking fiercely, his body rigid. Jack wheeled himself to the window, pulse hammering. A black pickup, no plates, idled at the edge of the property, just like the night before. The engine growled low, a predator's purr. Jack's breath came in shallow bursts. Briggs barked louder, the sound sharp and unrelenting. The truck sat there for a long, tense minute. Then the driver's side door opened. A figure stepped out. Tall, lean, hat pulled low. Jack's blood ran cold. Briggs growled, teeth bared, ready to strike. Then, just as suddenly, the figure turned, climbed back into the truck and peeled away, tires kicking up a cloud of dust. Jack exhaled, his chest tight, hands trembling. Briggs looked at him, eyes sharp and full of questions neither of them could answer. The next morning, Jack sat at the kitchen table, the coffee pot gurgling behind him. The paper sat untouched. His mind wasn't on the news, it was on the truck, the man, and Ethan. He heard the patrol car pull up, the door slam shut. Ethan walked in, sunglasses pushed up on his head, that same tightness in his shoulders. Jack spoke before Ethan could open his mouth. "I saw it again last night." Ethan froze. The truck. No plates. Same as before. Same man. Ethan's expression didn't change, but Jack saw it. The flicker of recognition, the way his fingers flexed just once. Jack leaned forward, voice low, measured. "Who is he, Ethan?" His son's jaw clenched. "Just someone passing through." Jack snorted. "Bull." Ethan's eyes hardened. "You're making this into something it's not." Briggs barked once, a sharp cutting sound that made Ethan flinch. Jack didn't back down. "You're in over your head, son. Whatever this is, it's coming back on us." Ethan's face darkened, his voice a low growl. "Stay out of it, Dad. You don't know what you're talking about." Jack stared at him, heart sinking. The boy he'd raised, the one who used to ride on his shoulders, who cried when his dog died, was gone, replaced by this hard-eyed man who spoke in clipped commands and kept secrets like they were weapons. Briggs pressed against Jack's leg, steady as a rock. Jack scratched the dog's head, voice low and sure. "Maybe I don't know everything, but I know a man when he's lying. And you, son, you're up to your neck in something bad." Ethan's mouth tightened. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the screen door slamming shut behind him. Jack sat there for a long time, listening to Briggs's breathing, the distant wind in the trees. He felt the weight of it all settling heavy on his chest. Something was coming, and when it hit, it would tear this family apart. By the time the sun dipped low over the Texas fields, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, Jack Henderson knew the storm wasn't just in the sky. It was here, inside his house, inside his family. The air hung thick, heavy with unsaid words and unspoken truths. Jack sat on the porch, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair like they were the last thing keeping him grounded. Briggs sat close by, eyes trained on the driveway, muscles tense beneath his black and tan coat. Jack watched Ethan's patrol car pull up, the tires spitting gravel. His son stepped out slow, movements sharp and clipped, like a man who'd been running, on adrenaline all day and was just waiting for someone to challenge him. His uniform shirt was untucked, badge gleaming, and his eyes, those eyes Jack had once seen light up when he taught him to fish, were cold as river stones. Ethan approached, stopping at the base of the porch steps. "We need to talk," he said, voice flat. Jack raised an eyebrow. You first. Ethan exhaled, glancing at Briggs like the dog was a ticking bomb. That truck's not going to be a problem anymore. Jack's gut twisted. What do you mean by that? Ethan's jaw tightened. Just means it's handled. Don't worry about it. Briggs let out a low growl, a warning. Jack's voice was steady, quiet. Handled how? Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at Jack for a long moment, and in that silence Jack heard everything loud and clear. Briggs barked sharply, standing up, fur bristling. Jack reached down, resting a calming hand on the dog's back, but his own pulse was racing. You listen to me, son, Jack said, his voice low and edged with steel. I don't know what mess you're tangled up in, but it's gonna drag this whole family down if you don't start telling the truth. Ethan's eyes flashed. I'm the law around here, Dad. You do well to remember that. Before Jack could respond, a car engine rumbled up the road. An old sedan this time, beat up, dust trailing behind it like a ghost. Briggs's ears snapped forward, body tense like a coiled spring. The car pulled to a stop in front of the house and the driver's door creaked open. Jack's breath caught. Out stepped a woman, tall, mid-40s, her hair pulled back tight, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, but it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Mariana, his daughter. Jack felt like the air had been knocked out of him. Ethan's posture went rigid, his mouth tightening into a thin line. Dad, Mariana called, her voice cracking just a little, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I heard about Mom. Jack could barely speak. His hands trembled and Briggs pressed closer to his leg like he could feel the sudden shift in the air. Ethan stepped forward fast, too fast, voice sharp. You shouldn't be here. Mariana's eyes narrowed. Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you. Jack's voice, when it finally came, was hoarse. Mari, baby girl, is it really you? Mariana's eyes softened for just a second, but then her gaze snapped back to Ethan, cold and calculating. I know what you've been doing, Ethan. I know about the money. About Morgan. Jack felt the world tilt. Ethan's face darkened, but his voice stayed cold, measured. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I know plenty, Mariana shot back, her voice rising. I know Mom didn't leave us because she wanted to. I know you've been funneling money through shell companies, and I know you've been waiting for Dad to finally give up so you can sign it all over. Briggs barked, a short, fierce sound that cut through the air like a blade. Jack's head swam. The pieces were clicking together too fast, and the weight of it all was crushing. Ethan took a step toward Mariana, his hands curled into fists. You need to leave. Now. Jack's voice cracked like a whip. Ethan, enough. Briggs stood between them, growling low, his body tense. Mariana's voice softened just a hair, her eyes locking onto Jack's. Dad, I have Mom's journal. I found it. I know the truth. Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. I'm not leaving. Until you hear it, she said. Ethan's face twisted, rage flashing like a spark in dry grass. You don't know what you're getting into, Mariana. Walk away before it's too late. Mariana didn't flinch. No, Ethan. You're the one who's in over your head. The tension was thick enough to cut. Briggs barked again, louder, this time snapping both Jack and Ethan out of their locked stares. Jack took a shaky breath, gripping the arms of his chair. Mariana, he said, voice rough but firm. Come inside, we'll talk. Ethan's mouth tightened, but he didn't move. He just stood there watching, his eyes dark and full of something Jack couldn't name, but it chilled him to the bone. As Mariana walked up the porch steps, Briggs followed close behind, his tail stiff, his body pressed close to her like a silent protector. Jack knew deep down that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as the sun set behind the fields, casting long shadows across the yard, he felt the storm building again, bigger, darker, and closer than ever. The air inside the Henderson house felt tight, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jack sat in his wheelchair by the kitchen table, watching Mariana pace the floor, her boots scuffing softly against the old wood. She held a worn leather journal in her hands, her fingers gripping it like it was the last piece of solid ground, in a world that had shifted too fast. Briggs lay between them, stretched out on the floor, his eyes sharp and ears pricked. Every time Mariana's voice rose, the dog's head lifted a little higher, as if he was ready to jump in if things went sideways. Ethan hadn't come back inside yet. Jack could feel him out there, somewhere in the dark, pacing like a caged animal, probably fuming over what Mariana had said. Jack's voice broke the silence. "Start from the beginning, Mari." She stopped pacing, looking at her father, her eyes dark and full of things she hadn't said yet. "I found this in Mom's things," she began, flipping open the journal. The pages were yellowed, the edges curled like they'd been handled too much. She kept a record of everything: Ethan, the accounts, the threats, even letters, emails from someone named Morgan. "She was scared, Dad, and she tried to protect you." Jack felt his stomach twist. Morgan. The name hit him like a slap. Mariana's voice cracked. "She left because Ethan told her to. Said, if she didn't disappear, he'd make sure she never saw us again." Briggs let out a soft, low growl, his body tensing. Jack's hands tightened on the arms of his wheelchair. His mind spun back to all the years he'd spent wondering why Sarah had left, thinking maybe it was him. His temper, the weight of the war still hanging off his shoulders like a pack he couldn't put down. But it wasn't him. It was Ethan. The front door creaked open. Ethan stepped in, moving slow, deliberate. His eyes landed on the journal in Mariana's hands, and for a split second, the mask slipped. There was a flash of panic, barely a flicker, before it was swallowed by that cold, calculating stare. Jack spoke first, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell me it's not true." Ethan's jaw flexed. He crossed his arms, looking at his father like a man sizing up an opponent. "You wouldn't understand, Dad. This place, it's a relic, it's falling apart. You sit here clinging to memories while I'm the one keeping the lights on." Mariana's voice cut sharp. "By laundering money? By threatening Mom? By trying to take everything Dad built?" Ethan's voice was like ice. "I did what I had to do." Briggs barked, a deep, angry sound that echoed through the kitchen. Jack leaned forward, his voice rough. "What exactly is it you had to do, Ethan? Tell me." Ethan's expression twisted, the words spilling out in a bitter rush. "Morgan offered me a way out. The department's underfunded, the county's broke. He needed a place to move cash, and I needed leverage. This ranch, this land, it's worth a fortune. You think sitting on it like a stubborn old fool makes you a hero? It makes you a liability." Jack's hands trembled. Rage and grief tangled together in his chest. "And Mom?" he asked, voice tight. Ethan's eyes darkened. "She was a problem. She didn't know how to keep her mouth shut." The room went dead silent. Briggs rose slowly to his feet, muscles rippling under his fur, his eyes locked on Ethan, ears pinned back, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward his belt, brushing over his holstered weapon. Jack's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare!" For a moment, it was a standoff. Ethan staring down Briggs, the dog bristling with fury. Mariana standing frozen with the journal in her hands, Jack's heart hammering in his chest. Then Briggs lunged. Ethan stumbled back, his chair scraping against the floor, barely dodging as Briggs snapped at his arm. "Briggs, no!" Jack shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Ethan drew his gun, the click of the safety like a gunshot in the tense air. Mariana screamed, dropping the journal, papers scattering across the floor like falling leaves. "Stop!" Jack roared, his voice shaking the walls. Briggs froze, teeth bared, chest heaving. Ethan's gun trembled in his hands, pointed at the dog, his finger twitching on the trigger. Jack's breath came hard and ragged. He forced himself to steady his voice. "Ethan, you lower that weapon right now." Ethan's eyes darted between Briggs and his father, a flicker of doubt of the boy Jack once knew, flickering behind the anger. Slowly, Ethan's arms lowered, the gun sagging toward the floor. Briggs let out one last growl, then backed up a step, but his body stayed tense, ready to defend. Mariana scrambled to gather the papers, her hands shaking. Jack slumped in his chair, exhausted, but his voice held steady. "This stops, Ethan. Now." Ethan stared at them, his face a storm of emotions: rage, regret, fear. Then, without a word, he turned and stormed out, the screen door banging behind him. Briggs stood at the doorway, watching the yard like a sentinel. Jack looked at Mariana, voice low, barely a whisper. "This isn't over." She nodded, her eyes glinting with determination. Briggs came back to Jack's side, pressing against his leg, steady and loyal. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears, his hand trembling slightly. "Good boy. We're gonna need you." Outside, the cicadas sang and the wind whispered through the trees, but the house held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The sky hung low and heavy over the Henderson ranch, the clouds rolling, in dark and slow like a warning. Jack sat on the porch, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair so tight his knuckles turned white. The air smelled of rain and dust, but under that, something sharper, like the crackle of a fire about to burn out of control. Briggs lay at Jack's feet, eyes locked on the driveway, tail still, every muscle in his body coiled tight. Inside, Mariana was at the kitchen table, sorting through the scattered pages from their mother's journal. Her face was tight with focus, but her hands shook as she smoothed the crumpled paper. Jack heard it before he saw it, the low rumble of a truck engine, tires crunching the gravel. Briggs shot up, barking sharp and loud, a sound that echoed through the quiet like a warning bell. Jack's gut twisted. The truck wasn't Ethan's patrol car. It was the black pickup, the one from the edge of the property, the one that had been watching. A knot of fear tightened in Jack's chest, but he shoved it down, leaning forward in his chair as if sheer willpower could push back the storm heading their way. The truck skidded to a stop at the end of the driveway. Two men jumped out. One, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a ball cap low over his eyes, the other wiry and fast-moving, scanning the yard like a fox looking for an opening. Briggs growled low, his hackles up, tail stiff like a flag in the wind. Jack could feel the air, shift, could taste the danger in it. Ethan came out of the barn moving fast. His face was a mask, hard, closed off, but Jack saw the flicker of recognition, the tension in his shoulders. "You shouldn't be here," Ethan snapped, stepping between the men and the house. The tall man, Cutter, grinned slow, like a man who wasn't afraid of anything. "We're just here to collect, officer. You know how it works." Mariana appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide, clutching the journal to her chest like a lifeline. Jack's voice rang out, sharp and cutting. "Get off my land." Cutter's eyes slid over to Jack and his smile widened. "You must be the old man holding up the works." Briggs barked again, stepping forward, teeth bared. The wiry man, Ray, snorted, glancing at the dog. "What's with the mutt? He looks ready to tear someone's throat out." "He just might," Jack said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. Ethan's voice was tight, his body coiled. "I said get out of here." But Cutter didn't move. He took a step closer, eyes locked on Jack like a predator, sizing up prey. "That land belongs to someone else now," he said, his voice low and oily. "You're just squatting on borrowed time." Briggs lunged. The movement was so fast it was a blur. One moment the dog was at Jack's side, the next he was on Ray, teeth snapping, a snarl ripping from his throat. Ray went down hard, cursing, trying to scramble back as Briggs pinned him, jaws at his throat. "Briggs, down!" Jack shouted, but the dog didn't let up. Ethan drew his gun, shouting, "Briggs off!" but his voice cracked. Fear, or maybe anger, it was hard to tell. Cutter moved fast, pulling a pistol from his belt, aiming straight at Briggs. "Don't," Jack roared. Briggs snapped his head toward Cutter, and in that split second, Ethan fired. The shot echoed through the yard, sharp and brutal. Ray screamed, clutching his shoulder. Briggs darted back, barking furiously. Cutter froze, gun halfway. Ray's eyes flashing with fury, Ethan's voice was hoarse, tight. "Drop it, Cutter, now!" For a second it was a standoff. Cutter's gun shaking in the air, Ethan's aim locked. Briggs growling low, ready to strike again. Then Cutter smirked, slow and mean. "You're playing a dangerous game, officer." He dropped the gun, hands raised. Ethan moved fast, cuffing him, breath ragged, eyes darting. Jack sat frozen, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack his ribs. Mariana rushed out to him, her hands gripping his shoulder. "Dad, are you okay?" Jack nodded, but his voice was rough. "It's not over, not by a long shot." Cutter laughed, even with his hands behind his back. "Morgan's gonna eat you alive, old man. You think this little show of force changes anything? It doesn't." Ethan's face twisted, the anger boiling over. "Shut up." But Jack was staring at his son now, the pieces snapping together in his mind like a jigsaw puzzle locking into place. "You knew they were coming," he said, voice low, bitter. Ethan didn't deny it. Briggs came back to Jack's side. His fur bristled, his breathing heavy. Jack reached down, his fingers trembling as he stroked the dog's head. "You saved us, boy," he whispered. Cutter and Ray were loaded into the sheriff's car, but the storm hadn't passed, not even close. Mariana's voice was tight, urgent. "Dad, we have to go to the sheriff. We have to tell them everything." Jack shook his head slowly, his eyes on Ethan. The look on his son's face, the cold calculation, the flicker of fear. It told him what he needed to know. There was no one to trust, not even family. The night was quiet, too quiet. The air outside, the Henderson ranch hung thick like the world was holding its breath. Jack sat on the porch, the creak of his wheelchair the only sound in the dark. His hands rested on Briggs's head. The dog pressed close, breathing steady but alert. The old German shepherd seemed to sense it, like he always did. Inside the house, Mariana flipped through the journal one more time, the pages worn thin from her hands. She could feel it too, that weight pressing in, the unspoken fear. Her father had told her not to trust anyone, not even the sheriff, and she believed him now with everything laid bare. Ethan was still out there somewhere, that much was clear. After the standoff with Cutter and Ray, he'd vanished. No word, no call, just gone into the night like a shadow swallowed by the dark. Jack hadn't slept. Neither had Mariana. Neither had Briggs. They waited. It was just past 5 in the morning when the sound of tires on gravel broke the stillness. Briggs was on his feet in an instant, ears up, body tense. Jack felt his own heart rate spike, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of his neck. Mariana appeared in the doorway, her voice tight. "Dad, it's Ethan's truck." Jack's stomach dropped. The truck rolled to a stop near the barn, the engine idling low. Ethan stepped out slow, hands empty, face unreadable in the pale dawn light. His uniform was wrinkled, shirt half untucked, and there was a look in his eyes Jack couldn't quite name. Anger, maybe, or regret, or something darker, deeper. "Dad?" Ethan called, his voice carrying across the yard. "We need to talk." Jack's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "About what? How you tried to sell out your own family? How you almost got us killed?" Mariana stepped onto the porch, standing tall, the journal clutched in her hand like a weapon. Ethan's gaze flicked to it, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "Put it down, Mari," he said, voice low. Briggs growled, stepping forward, his body a wall between Ethan and the porch. "Stay back." Ethan barked, but Briggs didn't budge. Jack's voice cut through, sharp and cold. No, son, you stay back. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Ethan's shoulders sagged, and he let out a long, shaky breath. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. It wasn't supposed to go this way. Jack shook his head, his voice bitter. It never is until it does. Ethan ran a hand over his face, the weight of everything pressing down on him. Morgan's not going to stop, Dad. You think this is over? It's not. The money's too deep. The deals are already in motion. If I go down, they'll come after you next. Jack's stomach twisted, but he held his ground. I'll take my chances, he said. Mariana's voice was steady, her chin high. We'll go to the sheriff, to the feds if we have to. You're not going to scare us into silence, Ethan. Ethan laughed, but it was a hollow, broken sound. You think the sheriff's clean? You think the feds care about a family feud in the middle of nowhere, Texas? They'll look the other way like they always do. Briggs barked once, loud and sharp, like a gavel striking. Ethan's gaze snapped to the dog. Something flickering in his eyes, fear, maybe, or respect. Jack spoke, voice low but firm. Whatever comes, we'll face it, together, without you if we have to. For a moment, Ethan looked like he might argue, like the fight in him wasn't quite dead yet. But then his shoulders slumped, and he looked away toward the horizon where the sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink. I never wanted it to be like this, he said quietly. Jack's voice was softer now, but no less steady. Then you should have made different choices, son. Ethan didn't answer. He just stood there for a long moment, staring at the ground, before finally turning back toward his truck. Briggs followed him with his eyes, tail low but still, ears forward, a sentinel to the end. As the engine roared to life and the truck disappeared down the road, Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Mariana sank into the porch swing, her hands trembling around the journal. Jack reached down, ruffling Briggs's ears. Good boy, he whispered, the words thick in his throat. Briggs leaned into him, tail thumping once, a quiet, steady reminder that some bonds can't be broken, not by time, not by secrets, not by blood. 2 days later, the sheriff's office made the arrest. The case files Mariana had gathered, the journal, the digital records, everything pointed to Ethan's involvement with Morgan and a network of dirty money running through the county. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean, but it was done. Jack watched from the porch as they led Ethan away in cuffs, Briggs sitting by his side, head high, watching it all with calm, steady eyes. The house was quiet after that. Too quiet, maybe. But there was a kind of peace in it, too. Jack sat out on the porch that evening, a cup of coffee in his hands, the sun setting slow over the fields. Mariana sat beside him, flipping through the last pages of the journal, her expression soft but thoughtful. Briggs lay at their feet, eyes half closed, breathing steady. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. We made it through, huh, boy? Briggs let out a soft huff, his tail tapping the porch once, twice. Jack looked at Mariana, the weight of everything still heavy but no longer unbearable. Family's messy, he said quietly. But it's still worth fighting for. She nodded, eyes misty. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like the pieces were finally falling into place. Thank you for sticking with us through this story. We hope it reminded you that sometimes the strongest protectors come in unexpected forms. What would you have done in Jack's shoes? Would you have stood your ground against your own family, or walked away to protect your peace? Let us know your thoughts below. And until next time, take care of each other and don't forget to hug your dog today.